Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable Activism Webinar. Today, we're going to feature Animal Defenders International, Matt Rossell. He's the campaigns director. I'll give you a little more details about him. First, I'll just say In Defense of Animals is super excited to host these Sustainable Activism Webinars, and they're really part of our campaign to give animal activists as much support as they need to continue with their great work. My name is Lisa Levinson, and I'm the director of the Sustainable Activism Campaign for In Defense of Animals. And that's what we do, is provide emotional and spiritual support for activists. And today, like I mentioned, we've got Matt Rossell on board. I'm going to give you a few more details about him for those of you who don't know him. And I'm happy to say Matt is a friend of mine and someone I admire very greatly. I'm looking forward to this webinar. So today we'll be featuring Surviving Activism, a perspective from behind enemy lines. And Matt Rossell, our presenter, is the campaigns director for Animal Defenders International, as I mentioned. He's heading up their Stop Circus Suffering and No Fun for Elephants campaigns to end the abuse of animals in entertainment. Combining hard-hitting undercover video with solid science and grassroots organizing, ADI has helped pass dozens of circus bans and convince multiple cities, fairs, and other venues to end cruel elephant rides and performances. Matt's extensive experiences working undercover inside abusive industries, including circuses, fur farms, factory farms, research labs, and a slaughterhouse, have all helped to personalize his advocacy work. Matt's expert comments and undercover work have appeared in hundreds of news stories and documentaries, and he frequently speaks publicly on animal issues. So we're very fortunate to have Matt with us today, and he's going to share part of his story and also part of his, what we're calling an activist survival kit, how he was able to survive these experiences, which we're all very curious about, as many of us are activists, and some people may have undercover experience, but we're all curious to find out how can we sustain these activities and also to produce the good work and also practice self-care. So thanks, Matt. Just wanted to hear some of what you've got to say today. And for everyone, I'll be doing some of the technical navigating. And we've got a chat box. So if you navigate to the right, I have a there we go. Then it looks like some people have found it. You can chat in the chat box, and I'll be helping to navigate that chat box. And also other items later in this experience together, we're going to do a Q&A. So for now, if everyone can keep their muted volume and all of that for now. Later, we'll open it up for questions from everyone, and people will have an opportunity to turn on their audio and possibly video if they want to ask a question. So we're getting some people saying hi to us, which is so nice, in the chat box. So feel free to communicate with us that way until we start our Q&A. So thanks so much, Matt. I think we're ready for you to take it away. If you want to share, that would be great.
Thank you, Lisa. And this is a little awkward because I know I'm talking to a lot of friends out there, but I can't see you right now. But thank you all so much for my old friends and friends that I haven't met yet joining us here and taking this time to participate. And I hope we'll have a really lively discussion afterwards. And thanks to IDA for doing the sustainable activism. I've worked with Lisa a little bit on some things happening in the some kinks in the Los Angeles community that it's really important to have a resource where people can go to talk about issues they're having and, you know, become the best activists we can be, really, is the goal, I think. But so, yes, I worked undercover for about 7 years and had some really intense experiences. It all started for me back in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm from Omaha, and I was working as a security guard at Boys Town Hospital. And I had graduated with a degree in special ed, and I was kind of working in my field, and I was moonlighting as a security guard on the weekend, trying to put money together to get out of Nebraska. I had goals to move away. And on the other side of a locked door, I heard the pathetic cries of these kittens. And I had all the keys as a security guard, and I was able to go in and see what was going on. And I found the victims of this researcher, Ed Walsh, who was doing experiments on these kittens as young as 1 and 2 days old. And they were horrific experiments that left some of the kittens in a lot of pain without painkillers. He was doing brain surgeries on them and was botching a lot of the surgeries, and the kittens were, I just saw some really bad things, and not knowing exactly what to do, I reached out to an organization who asked me if I could try to get some video, try to get some more information. And one thing led to another. I started finding out more. I befriended the person who worked in the lab and was able to get some of the footage and some of the things that the organization needed. So at that point, I was really just a whistleblower in a situation where I had just seen something and decided to act on it. And the good news from that experience was the experiments were purported to be beneficial to deaf people. It was these hearing experiments on the ears of these little kittens. And when the deaf community found out, so this whole thing blew up in the media. It was a campaign that lasted for many, many months. But in the outreach to the deaf community, it became very clear that the deaf community did not support this terrible thing that was happening to these innocent animals to be done in their name. And so we had the support of many, many people in the deaf community, and it was really a shocker to the Omaha community, who really thought of Boys Town as this very positive thing for supporting young children, and a lot of people had no idea this was happening. So the animal-loving community was outraged, and after months of campaigning, these experiments were shut down. So it had a very good outcome. That sort of led me into this unlikely career as an undercover animal abuse investigator, which really wasn't my life plan, but I sort of followed it because it was my life at that point was leading me, and I was along for the ride, sort of. And so I did a whole series of investigations over the next few years. I was inside of many different factory farms. I've been inside of a veal farm in upstate New York, a turkey farm in Arkansas. I worked for a month on Walker Brothers Circus. We were, in particular, following a pair of elephants, Loda and Liz. These were the last two elephants from a herd owned by a company called Hawthorne Incorporated, which has since pretty much been completely shut down. But at the time, they had a very large herd of elephants. All of the elephants in their herd that they leased out to various circuses had been recalled back to their home base because of tuberculosis. And they had a massive tuberculosis outbreak. And Loda and Liz, the circus that I was following, Walker Brothers, they were not admitting these elephants were sick with TB, even though they were showing many symptoms that you could see. And there was a strong speculation that they were also sick with TB. And so my role there was just to follow the circus, but I approached the circus one day and was talking to some of the handlers and ended up talking to the matriarch of the circus, who offered me a job on the spot. So the next thing I know, I'm working for the circus as a tent worker, putting the tent up and down every day, a new show. It's a very grueling job, very difficult, just even without the animal cruelty, just We were working 12 and 14-hour days. We were making $150 a week. We were working 7 days a week. Very hard labor. It would take hours to set up the tent and hours to take it down. And then I was doing props during the show too, to be closer to the elephants and to learn as much as I could. I was actually working the elephant rides and doing props. And so I had a very close view of the Bear Act and the Dog Act and the elephants. And of course, it was all very sad for these animals who live in very tight confinement in circuses, as you all are aware. And these poor elephants with TB were forced to sometimes help put up the tent. They were, Liz especially seemed like she was suffering. She was, the elephants would sometimes be sleeping during the day because they were so exhausted from the lack of sleep at night. And the outcome of that, we were alerting the authorities at every single stop, and they were getting a lot of attention from state wildlife officials and the USDA. And finally, we were traveling through the South, heading back to their home in Florida, and they got stopped at the Florida border, and the elephants were sent back. And as I said, since then, that elephant company has been shut down. But you know, it was very difficult for all the animals on the show, and I was very concerned about getting caught because they really suspected someone had infiltrated them, especially on the day that the elephants were confiscated and sent back. So I finished out the show, and after that, I worked a shift in an Omaha slaughterhouse that was slaughtering cows. That experience was as close to any vision I would ever have of what hell would be like if hell existed. It was like a hell on earth. And I'm sure that many of you have seen images from inside of these places. The next 4 months I spent during the pelting season on a fox farm in rural Illinois, in Roanoke, Illinois, and was able to capture the life and death of these foxes. There were 1,000 foxes on the farm, and during that pelting season, 500 of them were killed for their pelts. And the industry standard practice is anal electrocution. And I was able to videotape that with a hidden camera in the waistline of my coveralls. And, you know, the only way that I could even justify it, because I'm literally participating and holding these animals as this fur farmer, Dan Ashelman, was doing this one after the other. Very painful, horrific procedure, was knowing that at least they were going to die. I mean, their life was so much worse, that the life they lived in these tiny cages, going crazy, running the wire, not even getting adequate water, going crazy. Animals in the fox farms were cannibalizing each other. The fur farmer was so negligent, he wouldn't even take the dead bodies out of the cages. They would just literally rot through the wire. I mean, it was just so horrific. And then also I was able to just, in my own mind at least, say goodbye to each fox as they died and videotape them, you know, because of the power of this video. And that's the whole purpose of these undercover investigations, as you know, is to make it real for people, to bring this reality out of the shadows and into the light so that people can see what really happens. And from that, we can make change. So I quit working for that organization after the fur farm experience. It was very difficult for me, but the positive outcome for that, besides he was prosecuted, the state came in based on our evidence and raided the farm he was charged and found guilty of animal cruelty charges and did suffer some financial penalties, and they forced him to change some of his practices. But I earned 10 baby foxes because he thought I was starting my own fur farm. So instead of paying me, he was actually paying me in fox pups. So it was very emotional and also scary to go back to his farm because a lot of things had leaked out. Some of the video had leaked out, and he was pretty sure that it was me when I went back there to get those foxes. But I was able to rescue 10 baby foxes, and my now wife, girlfriend at the time, Leslie, and I were able to, on a friend's property in an undisclosed, very rural location in the Panhandle in Nebraska, we were able to rehabilitate them. And it was amazing to see because everyone said, you know, these foxes are domesticated, and that's what the industry tells people. They're domestic animals, and so they, I guess, to justify what's happening to them, but they're not domesticated. And even after generations in captivity, these foxes were showing all the behaviors of the wild foxes that we had studied in our preparation to do this rehabilitation. They had all these separate different vocalizations. Foxes in the wild have 21 different vocalizations, and they are live in community, and they communicate with each other and warn each other about things. So like we were their predators. They were up in an enclosure way up high on a hill. We had built this big enclosure for them. So we could never see them after the first day because they dug a den on the first day. And whenever we approached the enclosure, they would give the call for their warning. They'd be like, ah! And then they would all go hide in the dens. So we had to set up cameras to observe them, but they were displaying enough behaviors, and we hoped that we did a good enough job as a surrogate parent. And by the end of the summer, we did release them, and with the hopes that some of them actually survived, and at least knowing that they, for the first time in 15 generations on this fur farm, these were the first foxes to be able to run free and at least have a chance to make it as a wild animal. And then my last experience was I spent 2 years working undercover at the Oregon National Primate Research Center in right outside of Portland, Oregon, in Hillsboro. And this is one of the several federally funded primate research centers that our tax dollars are affording. And at the time, they had 2,500 monkeys, and a very large percentage of them were in single cage housing. So you have like a rhesus macaque was the main species in a cage that's like 2 feet by 2 feet, and that is their whole life. And so what we all know and what the researchers know is that these monkeys are social primates, just like humans in many aspects. Their needs for community and attention and socialization are very similar to ours. And just like human primates, non-human primates suffer when kept in isolation. It's considered one of the worst forms of human torture to in prisons to keep someone in isolation. And that's exactly what's happening in all these research labs with all these monkeys living alone. And that was a very hard experience to suffer through that. I spent 2 whole years there, and I think that I sort of got to the point where I was living day by day and deciding every morning whether or not I could go back for one more day. But the positive side was that I had worked myself into a position in the psychological well-being department, which is a provision of the law, because they know these animals are suffering. They have this provision for psychological well-being. And unfortunately, the law is very vague. It doesn't have set criteria that benchmarks or anything that the labs have to follow. It just says the lab has to create a plan and follow their plan. And so, but even so, my job was to try to do better for the animals. And even though it was an uphill battle with so many thousands of animals and me being one person, I was able to document. I was able to, bring in lots of treats. I would go to all the whole food grocers and get produce and vegetables and things that they were going to throw out. And I would feed out a lot of food that was far more appealing to the monkeys than the greasy monkey biscuits that they would otherwise get. And just seeing the reaction when you walk into a room with a tub full of bananas instead of the greasy monkey chow that they're used to. And it was just so clear that it meant so much to them, just to get a peanut or a little tiny piece of banana. It was so important to them. But I was also able to document what was happening to these animals and all the behaviors, all the abnormal behaviors, the self-injurious behaviors, they're pulling out their hair and sometimes really hurting themselves, and all these things that are abnormal. I had created this massive paper trail of all the things that were going wrong and was able to document with video, and was there long enough to really show that the program wasn't working and that it was set up to fail. And when I left, 2/3 of my coworkers signed a complaint because, these people that are doing the actual hands-on work with the animals oftentimes are sensitive and caring, at least to some degree, and it's the scientists that are writing the protocols to do the experiments, and they don't necessarily have any real connection with the animals. They can often be in an office somewhere in their lab and have other people doing all the dirty work. So a lot of my coworkers actually agreed with me that things were not right, that laws were not being followed, that we weren't able to care for the animals appropriately. And there was a huge upheaval when I left because so many of my coworkers signed on to this complaint, and it created a huge issue, and did lead to some changes there. I think that, people always say when they hear about my undercover work, the reaction I get most often is, I could never do that. That's what I hear a lot. And the reality is I'm really no different than all of you and all the other sensitive people that are having a hard time or are suffering through the knowledge we have of all the animal suffering in the world. It's a blessing and it's a curse. I mean, it's our blessing because we wouldn't care and we wouldn't be doing this activism if we didn't have that sensitivity. So it's something that we should really embrace. I mean, it's really important that we have it, and we should really cherish it and celebrate it. At the same time, it makes it really tough to just know that there's so much suffering happening with these animals, and sometimes it seems like we're powerless to fix it, or why isn't it obvious to everyone else? It's so clear. And it's very easy to feel despair and to get depressed and to be angry. And I have to admit, when I was doing this undercover work, I had those feelings every day. And it was very, very challenging. And on the good days when I was managing it better, I was forcing myself to exercise, and I was doing yoga, and I was, eating right. And, with undercover work, you can't really talk to very many people. It's very important that it's very confidential, obviously, and the whole case can fall apart if people find out. So it's all about secrecy, obviously. So, but you always can have like one close confidant that you can talk to. And, I would reach out to that person for me, which was Leslie. And other times I didn't do as well. And sometimes I would, like shut off my emotions during the day and kind of lose it on the way home and just go immediately to bed. I honestly was really depressed for a lot of time during that whole experience. But I just never would let go of how important the work was. And it's actually, looking back on it, really the very best activism I feel like I've done. I mean, I've done a lot of work since then and a lot of things that I'm really proud of, but the undercover work really seems like it's still, even though it's been a long time since I've been doing that kind of work, the videos are still getting used. It's still getting exposure. It's still educating people, and I feel like it was a real privilege too, because I met some animal friends along the way that taught me a lot of things, and I'm now able to share their stories. And one of the monkeys that I met at the primate lab, she never had a name. Her number was 16162, and she was a female rhesus macaque who was in the time-mated breeding program, which was, these monkeys were just, their whole purpose was just to breed monkeys for research. They make lots of money off selling animals to research. At the time, upwards of $3,000. I think the numbers are way higher than that now, especially if they have, specific pathogen-free monkeys that, or animals that are bred for specific things. But 16162 caught my attention because she was always sick, and she had what was in the industry is called chronic diarrhea, which just means that she was so stressed out. It had no clinical, she had no clinical diagnosis. She just was always sick, and they couldn't figure out why. And really, it was just, she was just so stressed. And she wasn't even in an experiment, but just life in a cage was just too much. And she was really smart. We'd put a mirror on her cage, and she would use the mirror to look down the cage row to try to look at the monkey next door. And, animals who are considered to be fully conscious and self-aware, they use mirrors to test that. Like, they'll put a spot on the head of a chimpanzee, and they'll have them look in the mirror to see if they look at the chimpanzee as a threat, as another chimp, or they try to rub off the spot because they know it's them. And she, that self-awareness has not really been afforded to the lower species, the lesser of monkeys species, like the macaque. But I'll tell you, she knew she wasn't looking at herself in the mirror. She was definitely, using it to try to, see a neighbor or see if there was a technician coming down the row, or kind of use it to broaden her horizon a little bit. She eventually, when they finally noticed her, she had lived there for, I believe, 7 years, and she had never gotten pregnant. She was always too sick, and she eventually was killed for nothing. I mean, and that's the story people don't realize. People think that these research labs are doing experiments that are benefiting people, but a lot of this research is not helping anyone. And there's so much information now that we can get without using animals. A lot of this basic research that I saw, really all of it was garbage. And they're doing this gee whiz science that's not answering questions. It's just asking questions and it's getting published somewhere, but is anyone really looking at it? You know, they were doing experiments, using monkeys as experiments for studying divorce. You know, monkeys don't have families like we do, where they have, you know, a mother and a father and a family. They have matrilinear troop. They live in troops. They live in, you know, it's just completely a different social life. And so I could go on, but there was another monkey I want to tell you about. Her name was Joplin. Her number was 20006. Because they're all numbers in the lab. They have their number tattooed on the inside of their leg when they're babies. But we called her Joplin, me and another technician, and she was a female Chinese origin rhesus monkey that came from China, and we thought they were probably wild caught. And most of the monkeys that came in with her, the 100 that came in that group, were so frightened, and they would just entering the room, they would all crash into the corner of their cage. They would try to flee. They weren't used to being in a cage, but Joplin would just go to the front of the cage and just stare you down. And she was so fierce, and she never gave up. She just was such a strong personality in such a stark, adverse, horrible situation. She just never gave in and never cowered to her human captors. And even when I would give her treats and stuff, she would gladly take the treats, but then she would lash out and try to grab me and attack me afterwards. And I just respected her so much. And I think about her a lot when I'm doing my activism, because if she had that perseverance to keep up her hope and keep trying in a research lab, we all have a lot to learn from her, and can use her strength to kind of keep ours up when we need it. And there was another group of capuchin monkeys that were very elderly, and they were a part of a psychotropic drug study with drugs that weren't even really being used clinically in humans anymore. I mean, that's how outdated this experiment was, but it just kept going on and on and on because someone was getting funding. And so when there's funding available, the experiments continue. And that's the way these researchers will make a whole career out of some little corner of science, where they just keep getting funding and will change up their experiment a little bit to keep the grant dollars coming. But this is a happy ending story, because these monkeys, their story was so sad that when the videos broke in the media, the research lab just couldn't answer to why they were keeping these poor elderly monkeys captive. And so soon after the media broke in Portland, the research lab gave up 28 capuchin monkeys, and Rasmus was this little male, just a real vibrant little old guy. And he was a friend of mine. And I mean, I loved all of them in the room, but he was a special friend. And I was able to go visit him years later at the Austin Zoo, where he was rescued to. It was more of a rescue center than a zoo. And he remembered me and was so excited to see me when we were reunited. And I was able to see him in this setting where it's so amazing to see how resilient they were after some of them 30 years in a cage, isolated individually in cages, finally put together in a group where they could climb and eat whatever they wanted, had a whole variety of fruits and vegetables to choose from, and just interact with each other for the first time. And it was just amazing to see them build their muscles back up and get along and figure out how to be friends with each other, and just see them bounce back after a lifetime, really, for a research monkey, or for these monkeys, that's kind of like their full lifespan. And to see them at the very end of their life have some semblance of a real monkey life at the end was really great to see. And you know, the suggestions I have for people, you know, I want to open this up to questions here really soon, but the suggestions I have are really things that people already know about self-care. I mean, you know, talk to people, you know, have your friends. Even one friend is all you need, you know, that you can talk to. You know, exercise, eat right, get sleep, give yourself a break. You know, we're all only one person. You know, you can't do everything. So I think that you know, recognizing that you're doing as much as you can, and really do as much as you can. I encourage everyone to work as hard as you possibly can for the animals, but realize that you are only one person, and celebrate all the victories. You know, every little victory counts, and everything you do matters. When you have anger, you know, I look back on all the depression and anger and despair that I had during those years, and really what I did was I just focused my anger on helping the animals. You know, there's nothing the animals can gain from us, you know, being sad. And you can't let your own feelings get in the way of the action you need to take. You know, I would just try to harness that anger towards effective activism and just try to be as efficient and effective as I could at making change. And having community, obviously, you know, having friends and surrounding yourself with people who feel the same way and who support you. But what also really helps to get me through is just seeing all the success we're having. And, you know, the animal rights movement is having massive success. And I think that we need to look backwards at how far we've come to recognize that. I mean, sometimes you can just sit in the moment and see, you know, well, look at all the animals in factory farms and labs and circuses and feel really like despair about all of that. But when you realize all the laws that we've changed, how far we've come, how widespread veganism has become, and you know, I really love the organization I'm working for, Animal Defenders International. I was really attracted to it and remain very impressed by how a small group of people here are really moving mountains. I mean, ADI's President Jan Creamer's sort of motto has been, everything is possible. And it really is true. The more positive energy you put into your activism, the more positive things that are going to happen. We recently were able to rescue all of the circus animals from Peru in an Operation Spirit of Freedom. And this was a campaign that started with way back in 2008 with undercover investigations. We got the evidence, started going country by country throughout South America to pass animal protection laws. And then where we can, we've been enforcing them. And in Peru, after the law passed, we worked with the government. We went in, they would raid the circuses, we would rescue the animals. And we rescued over 100 animals from circuses and from the wildlife trade in Peru. We took them to a rescue center. Over the course of 18 months, we found the appropriate homes for all of the animals. The native species, mostly monkeys and other animals, we found homes and sanctuaries in country. And more than 30 lions we airlifted from Colombia and Peru to South Africa to this wonderful sanctuary, the Moya Big Cat Sanctuary, where they're now living out their lives. So they went from like the very worst possible situation in a tiny cage in a circus to now being in their native habitat in a safe enclosure where they're as close to being back in the African bush as they're in the bush. They're just in a safe enclosure and they're with their families. So that is what gives me hope. And you know, right now here in the U.S., we're working on these circus bans. We have our Stop Circus Suffering campaign. More than 60 cities and counties have passed local laws. There's several states that are working on it. Hawaii will soon be the first state to ban wild animals and traveling circuses. We're looking also at New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Hopefully California will follow soon. We're soon to reintroduce our federal bill to ban wild animals in traveling circuses across the country. And we're about to take our movie Lion Arc, which is the story, a documentary, which is the story of the same type of rescue we did in Peru, but we did in Bolivia back in 2011, 10 and 11, rescuing 25 formerly abused circus lions and airlifting them to a sanctuary in the U.S. And it's an amazing story. The DVD is now for sale. I encourage you, if you haven't seen the movie, go to lionarcthemovie.org. You can check out the tour. It's going to be in several cities on the eastern seaboard, DC, Boston. It's going to be in Jersey City. It's going to be in Atlanta, Portland, Seattle. So definitely check out the schedule. If you're not in a city where you can go see it on the big screen, check it out on DVD. But we're sort of running out of time. I definitely want to leave time for questions. So why don't we open it up and see what anyone else has to say?
Sure. Thank you so much. This is Lisa, first, as your hostess, to tell you thank you. This was such a moving presentation. I really enjoyed hearing your special story and the connection to the animals, and also the fabulous work that ADI is doing right now. I saw Lion Arc when it was premiering in Los Angeles, and it was so fabulous. I'm really
Thank you.
Totally support what you guys are doing. So now what I'll do is we'll open it up for questions. The way it will work is if you're here, if you're with us, you can either submit a question in the chat box, or you can also, if you're on the phone, see, that's an interesting question, how we do it on the phone, but on the computer, you can access through, there's a little button, looks like a microphone. It'll say audio on or audio off, and you can click that button to be able to speak and unmute yourself if you'd like to do that. And we also have video options, so if you'd like to share your screen and ask your question personally, you're welcome to do that too. We're trying to do a really interactive format here. So we do have people on the phone and as well as on the computer. Let's see if anybody on the chat box here. Go back to the participants. So let's see here. If anyone would like to add their audio and just ask a question, that's fine. If not, what I can do is read the chat box here. Or you may be able to do that as well, Matt. If you're seeing the chat box, you could check it out.
Yeah, I see one question that says, some of the undercover jobs you sort of just fell into, such as being a security guard on or the circus matriarch, asking you, for other jobs, how would you approach an animal industry to get hired? Well, the thing about a lot of these jobs where these animal industries where animals are being so severely abused is that the jobs are really horrible jobs and they're hard to do. It's labor intensive, dirty work, depressing. And so there's a high turnover. And so really, I found that you don't have to work that hard to get a job. I mean, some jobs like working at a research lab, you might need specific skills, a certain skill set, or have some sort of training. Although I was hired off the street, I think today they're have kind of made it a little bit more challenging to get into some of those jobs. But a lot of it is just hit and miss and applying for jobs. And, you know, I was surprised at how easy it could be.
Well, thank you for answering that question. And let's see. I'm reconnecting with the meeting. I don't know if you can hear me at the moment. Oh, here we go. Hi. Looks like we've got Joy. Would you like to ask a question? Let's see, Joy. I'm going to undo your mic here. Nope. Let's see. I'm seeing Joy on the screen. I don't know if she has a question. Hi. Can you put your audio?
My audio.
Great.
Okay. No, I'm just actually Matt. It's me, Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
You doing?
Yeah. No, I've been watching since it started, and as you know, I'm just highly emotional, and just watching these animals being rescued and then letting out, into what you guys have done. I guess that's kind of maybe all the rescues that I've really seen. It gets me either way. I mean, seeing them being, it gets me, like you were saying, my blood is boiling, and and then seeing them rescued like what you guys did just then fills my heart with so much. You could see it in their faces. I mean, you that they know that they are being saved. It's just it's a no-brainer, really, when you do that. And I just want to just say thank you for. I say it all the time on the internet, but I don't know if I could really do. I mean, I would love, like I told you earlier, what I'd really like to do, but I don't want to repeat it. I might go to jail. But I just think that I can't believe you did that. I mean, I don't know how I could sit and watch the foxes. I mean, I just don't know. That it takes somebody, just a certain type of person, to go in there and do it. I've seen in other documentaries, but I really don't have a question. I just like amazing what everybody does, and just thank you for just all of the work that you guys do. And at least I can play my small role in signing every damn petition I can ever come across, and just do what I can that way. But thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you. And I just have to give a shout out because Joanne is one of our amazing volunteers at the office. And she is so dedicated and has been coming in for more than a year now, right?
Just a little over a year, which I can't.
A little over a year. And she comes in twice a week and she helps us so much. And that's the thing, is we're a small organization and we wouldn't be able to accomplish the things that we do without people like Joanne helping us and just being so dedicated and having the time to come in and do things that take things off of our plate so we have more time to do other things. It's very, very important. And yeah, I can relate to that sensitivity you're talking about. I mean, just watching the videos for me is difficult too, even though I've actually been there and shot some of the video. It's hard to see. It's hard to watch, and yet, I feel like we force ourselves to get past it so that we can, focus on the work we have to do to help and make it better.
Yeah. I mean, and that's all you just try to get through it and know that you're doing a good thing, great thing, But thank you. Not so much going on.
Oh, can unmute the mic just so we don't get the feedback. There we go. Does anyone else have a question for us?
I see. Sorry I missed the first 30 minutes. I'd like to say I really appreciate people who do this kind of work. One of these undercover videos made me stop eating meat and become an activist. That's cool. Also, I checked the site for LineArc, and the date in DC, November 16th, is still to be confirmed. Will it really happen? The DC screening is definitely happening, but right now the DC screening is in Congress, and we are currently inviting members of Congress and their staff to that screening. It's a fairly small room. We really do want other people to come in. We want it to be a packed audience, but we're prioritizing members of Congress and their staff because our goal there is to inspire them to support and pass a federal bill. So I would suggest if you could email us at usa@ad-international.org, or even just message us on Facebook or however you can get in touch with us, and we'll put you on the RSVP list, because we're going to very soon probably be opening up that screening as soon as we know who's confirmed there. So it's just kind of, we're not quite sure yet. Someone's asking if they can just unmute themselves and ask a question.
Yes, and the answer is yes. You can go to the bar on the right and just click your audio on, and then you'll be able to ask your question.
Hello?
Hi,
Hello.
Christine.
Hi.
We can hear you.
Oh, great.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I just want to quickly thank Matt. I mean, you are for the sacrifices you make, and there really aren't any words, but to adequately thank you. And but I was just wondering how. I'm assuming you're no longer doing undercover work. I don't know, and I won't ask, but I just wonder if how do you cope with the lasting effects that has on you in the long term? You mentioned the things that you did to take care of yourself while you were doing the work, but how do you deal with the lasting, such as the vicarious trauma from seeing those images? And those are, I could tell just watching you speak about how those animals still are in your heart today, and you still care about them today. And
Yeah.
I don't know how long ago it's been, but I'm sure it'll last your whole lifetime. So I'm just wondering how you deal with that in the present situation, in the present, even though it's no longer an active part of your life.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if it's really so much different maybe from how we all have to deal with the knowledge of all these animals, and where they're at, and the overwhelmingness of it all. I mean, yeah, some of people used to always ask me, like, did you have nightmares? Do you have nightmares? And I never really had nightmares. I kind of felt like maybe the daytime was so nightmarish that like my body and my psyche wouldn't let me think about it in my sleep. It wasn't something that I really dreamt about so much. But sure, like the feelings come back up, and when they do, I just deal with it. Sometimes I get emotional about it. I cry, just like we all do, I think, sometimes when we are struck by something in the moment. And for the most part, though, it doesn't slow me down in my day-to-day life. It doesn't affect me on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I feel like my tolerance sort of built up over time. Like my experiences in the years of undercover work sort of helped me get ready for the next experiences, and it just sort of all built on itself. Not that I would become callous to what I was seeing, but in just being able to cope with it and being able to just sort of compartmentalize it and be like, I have a purpose. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing here. I'm going to witness this. You know, there's a lot of work that has to happen after hours. It's like having two jobs because you have to document everything afterwards too. So it's not just being there during the day and doing the work, but you also have to meticulously keep notes and keep the video, whatever video or documentation you're getting organized. So part of it is just so overwhelming to just keep it all together that you just have to stay focused on that. And over time, you know, I just look ahead at all the activism we're doing and all the successes we're having and just keep working towards the next victory. That's how I deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Christine. And we have a couple of other questions. One question from Phoenix who's asking, for a person who is pretty active in the animal activist communities, how do they get involved with doing undercover work? Is it possible after they've already had an identity as an activist?
Well, back in the day, it used to be a lot easier because now you can just Google anything, you know. It's much easier for someone who doesn't have a real name in the movement. You know, I would start by Googling yourself and seeing what comes up and seeing how much of that you could possibly manage. Is there any way that you could sort of get rid of some of those references? I never did this, but I think some people have found creative ways to use alternate identification so that they're not necessarily who they are when they apply for jobs. And if you're really interested in pursuing undercover work, you know, I would consider reaching out confidentially to an organization that you admire that's doing undercover work and talking to them about it. That's probably the easiest way. And, you know, undercover investigators are always needed. It's not an easy job and not everyone wants to do it, so, or can do it. So if you're inclined to try, you know, I would reach out to an organization. We're one of those organizations that use undercover investigators, but there are many others. So that's what I would suggest.
Thanks, Matt. And there's also a question on here, how to deal with people from the animal industries who are critical or angry about what you're doing. Have you ever had to deal with people like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I briefly mentioned the fur farmer when I went back to go get the foxes. I mean, he was he loved me when I worked there. I mean, I was sort of the son he never had. I mean, he was trying to get me to move onto some property that he owned down the road and start my fur farm there. And he had 2 daughters and no sons, you know. And when I went public, or when the case broke, and I was really one of 2 employees, and he pretty much knew the other guy couldn't have done it. So it was pretty obvious who it was. I mean, yeah, he felt totally betrayed. And I would say that happens virtually every single experience. I mean, at the Primate Center, it was very interesting because, like I said, 2/3 of my coworkers signed a complaint, but that complaint was filed internally, and everyone was okay with admitting all the fault and wrongdoing and problems as long as we were talking inside of this dysfunctional family that was the primate lab. But when I went outside of that and went to the public with the video that I had taken, and then they realized that I had previously been an undercover investigator and was a vegan and everything else, they felt betrayed. And And I really, because I had spent so much time there, I called up every single one of my colleagues there, and I explained to them why I did what I did. And you can imagine everyone reacted a little differently. Some of them actually said, I'm glad you did what you did, and I will never admit that publicly, but I believe in you, and I still love you. And others wouldn't take my call, and it was the wide range of reactions. Yeah, I mean, these people don't want to get exposed, and very often they turn the table and try to accuse you of exactly what they are doing. Like at the primate lab, they said I got the monkeys sick, that I was the one who scared them to make them attack themselves. I mean, just all these crazy claims that I, would go in there and purposefully injure animals and scare them in order to get video. And luckily, Dr. Jane Goodall came out in support of me, and she had reviewed the videos that I had released, and she, of course, knows a lot about primate behavior, and she was able to back me up and say, there's no way that Matt could have done this by scaring these monkeys. This is behavior that is from the husbandry and the life that they're leading inside the lab. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if I really got at what you're asking, but.
Yeah, I think that was very, very helpful. And then there's a question about if it's legal to apply for a job in an animal industry if you have ulterior motives. But it's a tricky question.
Yeah, so I'll answer that by telling my personal experience, which was at the time in Oregon, there was a law in the books that was specific to that made it, I believe, a Class C felony to go into a research lab with the intention of getting information and exposing it to the public. The reality though is I didn't know what I was going to see when I went in there. And I went in there, even though I had other previous experiences working undercover for an animal rights organization. When I went to the primate lab, I was not working for an animal rights organization. And I genuinely wanted to see what was going on. And when I saw what was going on, and even after the very first day, the very first thing they showed me, even before I got hired, was appalling, which was this room where all these juvenile monkeys had been stolen away from their mothers and were screaming out and crying out for their mothers. And even then, I didn't know what that screaming was. I wasn't a primatologist, but I mean, anyone with any sense of compassion could tell that these animals were in distress. So I knew I started to realize very quickly that there was gonna be problems there, and I knew a lot about the USDA and the provisions of the law from all of my undercover work. So when I realized that they were breaking the law, I felt obligated to reach out to the USDA inspector and report it. And they never did pursue that. They could have possibly tried to bring charges against me. But the reality is a lawsuit like that or a challenge like that is going to make tons of media. The last thing they wanted was more media. I was actually, when I went public, challenging them to sue me. I'm like, if what I'm saying is not true and you're trying to claim that I'm lying and I made all this up, well, then if it's not true, you should be able to vindicate yourself through a lawsuit. You should challenge me in a lawsuit. And they never did, because they knew what I was saying was accurate, and I had plenty of evidence. And so they just wanted it all to go away. They didn't want to bring up criminal charges against me.
So a couple other questions here. One, have you heard of the monkey facilities in Hendry County, Florida? Are you familiar with any sort of plans to, campaigns against them?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a campaign that ADI is actually actively working on. ADI's involvement in that is, we did an undercover investigation on the island of Mauritius, which is south. It's a small island off the southeastern coast of Africa. And it's a vacation resort for many, but it's also a breeding facility, and there's many wild macaques there that are being rounded up, mistreated, and shipped all over the world for research. And we did an investigation there. We exposed this. You can see it on our website. But we found out through that investigation that they were planning to bring some of these cynomolgus macaques to Hendry County, where there was already these other breeding facilities already underway. And in fact, I think Jane Velez Mitchell is down there right now. There's a lawsuit going. There's so much going on surrounding that issue. They're trying to build this another primate breeding facility down there, and there's many problems with it. When primates escape from these places, they can wreak havoc on the local agriculture and the wildlife. They become a public health risk. They can carry diseases like herpes B is a zoonotic disease that people can get from a bite or a scratch from a monkey, and it's deadly. It's not as dangerous to monkeys, but in humans it can kill you, and it has. And there's been a very notable case in a lab researcher that died very shortly after being bitten by a monkey. Of course, it's inhumane, and of course we know that this primate research is not valuable, that it's wasting tax dollars that could be spent on better research. So there was a lawsuit filed by another organization that was challenging the fact that the county had not done proper public announcements and had not gone through the proper public vetting process. And so there's many different things going on with that right now. ADI has been reaching out to local, state, and federal legislators that are representing that area, highlighting all the things I just mentioned about all the reasons why this should not be built. So we'd love, especially if you live in the area, but we'd love anyone to get involved, and everyone needs to reach out to their members of Congress about primate research and urge their members of Congress and their senators to look into primate experimentation, and with the goal towards ending it in this country.
Well, thank you so much for explaining all of that. And we have one other question. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to pop on and ask their question through their voice or video, but one question here on the chat is, what type of activism do you think is most effective? And when we have limited time and energy, what's the most efficient way to help animals?
The best way to help animals? Was that the question?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think that everything everyone is doing is contributing something. I mean, there's so many different ways, and I think that different people have different skill sets. And so, I think people need to kind of find their own niche where they best fit in the movement and where they can offer the most. Some people go protest, and I think protesting definitely helps raise the public profile and gets people more aware of issues. Some people are out doing vegan outreach and trying to, interact with people one-on-one, and that's really important, and that's having a positive effect. All the protesting helps us who are working on lobbying. It helps raise the public profile so that our legislators realize this is something that their constituents want to see happen. Ultimately, passing laws is how we protect animals. But all these other things that are happening to raise awareness through social media, through protests, through all the documentaries that are being made, through the books that are being written, lawsuits that are being filed. I mean, I think all of it kind of works together to advance animal rights and to help protect animals and pass laws. So I would just encourage people to kind of, I mean, what we're focusing on right now is our model is to do undercover work, to inform legislation, to pass laws, and then where we can rescue those animals. And that's sort of the model that ADI follows. But there are so many other things that support that, and all of the volunteers across the country who are doing their little part by emailing their legislator, by showing up at a protest, by coming to a hearing and testifying, to writing a letter to the editor. There's putting messages out on your social media and Facebook. There's lots and lots of things that are contributing to effective activism. So I don't think there's any one thing. It's hard to pin it down.
Well, thanks for that. That's helpful for everyone to know, just so that they can continue doing the thing that they enjoy most. And I think that's key too, to do the type of activism that suits you, what works with your lifestyle, what gives you the most effective tool for expression. And everyone will be a little bit different with that. To put your passions and your skills together with your activism. That's a wonderful, wonderful feedback, Matt. So I'd like to just take the moment to thank everyone for joining us this evening. That's what makes it really special, is that we can all interact and ask questions and share video and do the chat box, and so we can feel like we're really together in the same virtual room. And special thanks to Matt for sharing your stories with us and helping us to understand what is it like to be an undercover investigator, and what is the profound influence it has on animal rights, and also on our own psyche and our own sense of what we've done. It certainly seems like that was a very effective part of your story as an activist, like that it was moving to you, and it's probably influenced all of your activism ever since.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So for everyone, we do these Sustainable Activism webinars every month, and our next one will be December 1st. I believe we have Matt Ball on board with us, and he's another amazing activist. So we're overjoyed to be able to feature everyone's work here and have an opportunity to really talk one-on-one with people. And again, this is our first time really using this new format, so it's called Blue Jeans. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can certainly send us an email, let me know what you thought, and I hope you'll join us again. We also, next week, we have a vegan spirituality online gathering for those who are interested in that, and we have Steve Kaufman, who's the chair of the Christian Vegetarian Association. He's been doing that for many years, and he's going to share with us his insights on Christianity and spirituality, and asking some pretty controversial questions and being able to provide some answers for it. So we're looking forward to that. That'll be at the same time next week on Thursday. So I hope everyone has a wonderful week, or until we see you next time. And thanks again to Matt for sharing your story and being with us today. We will provide a replay. So to everyone who registered, you'll get a replay link, and we'll also post it on the In Defense of Animals website.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.